Hello, welcome again to Family Tech Live. I am doing this every Tuesday at 12 Mountain Time, 11 Pacific. Uh, would that be 2 Eastern Time? Probably. So join me every Tuesday and we go over different things about technology in the news, different documentaries. We've done the social dilemma, and today we are talking about childhood 2.0. And actually, I just saw that Protect Young Eyes joined. So awesome because he is in this documentary. So if he has anything to add, I would love for him to pipe in as well. So, I am going to just kind of go through the documentary, kind of what my thoughts and feelings were during the whole thing. This was actually the first time I'd seen it. I hadn't watched it prior to this week. I'd been meaning to for a long time, but this was just kind of the kick in the pants I needed. So, this is the documentary is called Childhood 2.0. It is available on YouTube for free. So, if you want to check that out, you just search Childhood 2.0 and you'll be able to find that. For those of you who are on YouTube, because I go live on YouTube and on Instagram at the same time, for those of you on into YouTube, I will link the documentary in the description. So you'll be able to get to that really easily from the YouTube channel. So the documentary starts out with videos of kids, asks parents, "What do you love about your kids?" And I was trying to think of what my answer would be to that question. There's just so much. I mean, you love your kids. That's just the basic, 2 cents about it. You love your children. And what you love about your children, um, it could change from day to day. But there are so many answers about all the awesome things that their kids are and what they're doing. And then during one of the interviews, one of the parents' phones starts ringing and is like, "Oh, this is pretty ironic because the phone is ringing. We're going to be talking about devices and everything for your kids." So he thought that was pretty funny. So we start talking to Joel Stoddard, who is a doctor in pediatric mental health. He is talking about how in the past communities worked together, and this is definitely true. We always say like it takes a village to raise kids, but these days it doesn't seem like we're utilizing that village. There's so many. Everyone's isolated and in their own homes and things like that. In the past, you would see, here's an example from my past. My brother, who was, I think, 14 at the time, maybe 15. I know he did not have his driver's license. And he was driving one of my parents' cars around the neighborhood. Um, and a neighbor saw him, had him pull over, and was like, "So are you going to tell your parents or am I?" And so my brother had to go home and tell our parents that he was out driving the car. And that's just the whole like kind of community raising mentality where, I see somebody else's kid doing something that I know they're not supposed to be doing, and I'm going to call them out on it. And I will, make sure they are, getting the appropriate punishment from their parents. I'm not going to punish him, but I'm just going to be like, "Okay, so I noticed that you were doing this. Your parents are going to find out about it. Either you're going to tell them or I'm going to tell them." And I think we're scared to do that these days. We're scared of parenting other people's kids. And I'm not saying that you need to, like I said, you don't punish the kid, but you can call them out and say, "I know you're not doing something that you I know you're doing something that you're not supposed to be doing." So I think that was a lot more prevalent in the past. And so they were talking about that. And then others chime in about how life was in the Depression. Obviously, I didn't grow up in the Depression. I'm not that old, I promise. But my grandparents did, and so they were talking about an older lady who grew up in the Depression. Um, and then the kids in the documentary are asked what they think their parents probably did for fun back in the day. One kid says, "I don't know how they would communicate with their friends." And when that came across I was watching it in my office, and my son's bedroom is right next door. He comes in because they were on fall break, and he comes in and is like, I wrote down exactly what he said. He comes in while I'm watching and recommends people use vocal cords and head over to their friend's house. And I'm just like, "Oh, I love that you just said that." So, my son who, we've had so much technology in our house ever since my kids were little because I've been in IT for so long. I've been doing this, social media and blogs for so long, about technology. So, I love that he came in when he heard, I don't know how they would communicate with their friends. He's like, didn't you just, like, walk over to their house and, like, talk to them?" And I'm like, "Yes, yes, we did. Thank you, son." So I loved that he came in and chimed in on that. Um, One girl says we probably used fax machines. Yeah, I don't think my friends had a fax machine. Um, yeah. So no, we did not use fax machines. Those were mainly for businesses. Um, and the kids that they're interviewing say they were probably outside a lot. And I remember being outside a lot. I remember hanging out at the park. There was a park near my house. The mall, of course, we would hang out at the mall all the time. And then I kind of wrote myself a little note here. We made our own fun. And I remember my brother, again, I think I'm just throwing my brother completely under the bus today. Same brother who was out joyriding. I do have two brothers. Um, he would make dry ice bombs with his friends. So they'd get dry ice, they'd put it in just a plastic bottle, tighten the bottle, shake it up, and like throw it in the middle of the street, and it would explode the bottle. So if you don't know what dry ice bombs are, now you do. But, and I remember, my dad was okay with this, just boys having fun. And one day, my dad was home and him and his friends were making little dry ice bombs, and he like had just screwed the cap on, and so it was too late to do anything, and a neighbor came out and was like, "What are you guys doing?" And he's like, "Sorry, sir." And he like threw it out into the street and it exploded. And and he felt really bad, but then the police came to our house and my dad was just like, they're just being kids. But so I think there was a lot of that. We did have to like walk over to a friend's house or ride a bike to a friend's house. We could call them. I remember being on the phone a lot, um and then I made a note, I'm like, wherever the bikes were, that's where everybody was. So if you're the parent looking for your child, you just drove around the neighborhood until you found the house with all the bikes, and then that's where all the kids were. So that's how we found people back then. Um, they asked the teenagers in the documentary. Um, so there's some parents, there's some experts, and there's these teenagers, and it's like usually the teenagers of the like parents and experts. So we kind of got both sides of the story, and I thought that was really cool. um so they asked the teenagers, how do you think they got a hold of each other back when we were kids? And I said the dial an actual phone number, the cord stretching. I remember, we have those little like cords, and I'd stretch it super far so I could talk to my friends. But I had my own phone line. So my dad is also in IT. And so I grew up, I mean, I'm 42 and I've always had a computer in my house. And that's not common for somebody who is 42. I remember playing on DOS before I even remember, anything else. So we've had a computer in the house all the time, and I had a modem when I was in high school, which not a lot of kids did. Or, I mean, my dad had a modem for work because he would do stuff from home. And so we had a second phone line in the house that was for my dad's modem. And so I got to use that second phone line whenever my dad didn't have to use it for work. And so that was like my phone. And like, 'cause I'm the youngest. So, if you have siblings, the youngest gets all the stuff, right? So I am the youngest and I had my own phone line, but that was because my dad had a modem. So, I mean, and this is back in the 90s. So, like 95, 96. No, even earlier than that. I was around 14, 15. So that had to have been like 95, 94. So, anyway, so that's kind of how things were back in the day. And they did a good job of like kind of explaining that. So then comes the information age. Kids are super intuitive with mobile devices. Most of these parents are talking about how their kids know more than they do, and so I'm going to touch back on that later. And some of the parents said they can't catch up. Kids will have to navigate and make decisions about technology faster, and we are currently the experimental generation. So our generation, we didn't have devices when we were in high school, and so we're kind of making this whole parenting thing up as we go because we don't know how that goes. So, um, as we didn't grow up with it. And so, like, basically, this is the trial period. This is parenting beta version. And some of us are going to screw up and some of us are going to crush it. So, it's just going to have to figure out what's going to work best. So, saying the kids are saying how awesome the internet and social media are, and then we had to use book encyclopedias, um, and how tech can help us keep track of our kids. I remember book encyclopedias. We had the big like thing of encyclopedias, and you'd have to like pull it out and get the right letter and everything. And it always reminds me of that Friends episode when Joey buys the V volume of the encyclopedia. So if you're not a Friends fan, I'm sorry, because Friends is the best. Anyway, um, then they start talking about, are parents more afraid of the real world or the online world? And I thought about that for myself because my fear is that the online world will bleed into the real world. And what I mean by that is, something happens online and it has real consequences in the real world. And I think a lot of kids don't really make that separation. They think like, behind the screen, I'm this person and I can do these things. But when I'm in the real world, I'm a totally different person. And I think when their online activities bleed into real world consequences is when that is a problem. So for me, it's not necessarily a fear of the real world versus the online world. It's a fear that things that happen here will translate into things that are happening over there. So for our generation, like parents seem to be more worried about physical danger than online danger, which I thought was super interesting. Because we grew up in the whole stranger danger era. Don't get into a white van with dark windows with some guy promising puppies. So it's interesting that we feel like the real world is a more dangerous place than the online world. I mean, not for me, because I know, I've been in IT for 20 years. Um, I know the dangers that are online, but I think a lot of parents don't equate that. They don't understand how dangerous the online world can be, as opposed to the real world dangers. So then my so it's funny because on the documentary they say they have a hard time wrapping their head around the online danger, and my son pipes in from the next room again. He goes, "You understand." And I laughed again because he was clearly like listening to the whole documentary. I mean, he was doing stuff in his room, but every time he had a comment, he made the comment. So yes, there is real dangers online, and I think it's really important for parents to understand what those dangers are. Um, and then the experts were saying, statistically speaking, physical dangers are not as prevalent as online dangers. And I said a big yep. Um, so now we're getting into bullying. So kids are getting bullied for not having a phone as early as sixth grade. And I did a whole live about tech bullying, basically, and mainly as it relates to iPhone versus Android, because these teenagers are leaving out people, their friends who have Android devices because they can't be on iMessage, which is so funny because that's such a United States problem. Most other countries use WhatsApp, like they barely use um, iMessage. They're like, why are people still using iMessage and like SMS? Because there are other applications that are better. But in the US, iMessage is a very big thing, at least among the teenagers. And so kids who have Android devices can be left out of conversations and things like that. And I think that's just a real shame. But you'll have to get into my whole other live about that. I went on I think the live is called My Rant. It's time for a rant. So definitely check that out. But and then time spent on phone is skyrocketing. Kids are saying 7, 8 hours a day, things like that. I touched on this when I was covering the social dilemma. That a lot of times kids will be like, "Oh, I was only on my phone for like a half an hour," but then if they look at the real data, it's a lot more than that. So because it's easy to kind of get lost in that online world, and you don't realize how much time has passed. I mean, I'm guilty of it as well. So, time spent on phone is skyrocketing across the board. I'm saying adults, kids, everybody. Um, and tech companies are engineering how long they can keep you online. Like I said, we talked about this with the social dilemma. And it comes in, Tristan from Social Dilemma. So if you haven't watched that video that I did when I broke down the social dilemma, definitely check that one out. But it says the swipe down to refresh gives you the same sensation as a slot machine. So, you swipe down and it refreshes and it gives you something new or it doesn't, but it's like gambling. It's like using that slot machine. And he said that in the social dilemma as well. So I just thought that's an interesting take on that and like how addicting gambling is, and then how much that can translate into just swiping and getting a refresh on that. So um if balance isn't introduced early on, addiction can set in quickly. So they're talking about brain development, and frontal lobe doesn't develop into your mid 20s. And I see this all the time with comments on my posts. So, I do a lot of posts about parenting. I do a lot of posts about all kinds of technology, but the posts that I have about parental controls and things like that get a lot of hate and comments from people who clearly do not have children, and who are clearly under that 20 years old. So it's interesting to me that those are the ones that are commenting with this hate for my content, because I'm like, they're the ones that don't quite understand it all the way, and it's not necessarily their fault. Their brains are not completely developed, so they don't realize how damaging these things can be. um and so, they always talk about privacy and trust. Those are the big things that they come at me for. They said, like, your child is a human and deserves privacy, and and trust. And I always kind of come back with, there's two things that I come back with. So privacy, nobody gets privacy online. I have a whole video about that. If you haven't watched that one, definitely check that out. But nobody gets privacy online. Even if you think you are having a private conversation, the person you are having the private conversation could be recording that video, you know, could be screenshotting it, could be doing anything to permanently record that conversation and share it with somebody you don't want it to be shared with. So, so there is no privacy. The, anything you write online can be used against you and will be used against you on the internet. Um, so privacy is not a thing. And so if my kid wants to have privacy, they can have privacy with a pen and a piece of paper in their bedroom, um, or with a actual conversation with their friend. But online, I'm going to know about it because the world would know about it as well. So I'm going to know about it first so I can stop it from, at least try and stop it, because once it's out there, it's out there. No matter if you delete it, no matter if you take it back, it's out there. I always talk about, um, you know, as an IT manager, people will, message, or, call into the help desk. They're like, I sent an email I didn't want to send. Can I get it back? And, 9 times out of 10, you cannot get that back. It is delivered instantly to the other person's inbox and there's no take. So, there are some ways when you can do that. It's just if it's in the same company, sometimes you can retract that and things like that. There are getting there, but if they've already opened it and it's gone, it's done. So that's one really important thing that kids need to understand, is that anything they do on their device is not private, no matter how much they think it is private. And then the trust thing, and this is what the analogy I always use is, I don't like, you're not wearing a seatbelt because I don't trust you to sit in your seat. You're wearing a seatbelt for when stuff happens. So if I get in a car accident, you're going to be staying in your seat because of that seatbelt. But if I got in a car accident and you didn't have that seatbelt on, you're ejected and you could pass away. So the seatbelt isn't because I don't trust you to sit in. The seatbelt is to protect you when things go wrong. And that's what I say about parental controls. It's not there because I don't trust you. It's there to protect you for when things go wrong, even if that's protecting you from yourself. Um, so those are my two things about privacy and trust. But so we're talking about brain development, though. Frontal lobes, kids don't. And then they're talking about these kids, or these teenagers that they're interviewing, say that kids today don't have coping skills and they don't like talking about hard things. I will say that's partially me. I don't have hard conversations. I came from a family where you kind of just bury all that stuff, and I'm working with a therapist on stuff like that. But so I kind of understand this, but I also agree that kids are not developing these coping skills. And I don't know that I would blame the technology so much for this happening. Or is it more of a Gen X problem where um, where we're Gen X and we were ignored. The most Gen X thing to ever Gen X is that, like, nobody ever talks about Gen X. And so we were, uh, kind of left to our own devices and kind of figure things out on our own. And I think because of that, we either do too much or not enough. And we don't have that middle ground to say, hey, we want to do everything for our kids because nobody did anything for us. And as we do all these things for our kids, they're not developing these coping skills that they need. We're not letting them experience hard things. And so, um, but I do agree with them here. They're understanding facial expressions and things like that are getting lost because so much of their activity is over text. And so they're not getting nuances in conversations. And they also talk about anxiety and depression increasing. Um, and I agree. s- A lot of it can be related to technology, but it's not necessarily the technology's fault. It is the people who are, giving you free reign of that technology, um, to kind of get yourself into these, unhealthy places that are causing these problems. So, um, the ER doctor says that childhood obesity and mental health issues on the rise. I can, the data is there. Totally agree with that. Um, Teens are saying they have to use phones and social media for information and communications. Adults and teens are addicted to their phones. And we need to show how to use technology appropriately. So I put on here, the do as I say, not as I do. I'm guilty of that. I'm like, hey, you've been on your phone too long. It's time to shut it off for the day. And my kids come back. Okay, so how long have you been on your phone? And it's a it's a valid point. And so then we make a decision all together. Okay, let's all put our phones down and let's play a board game or something like that. Because you can be just as guilty as the kids are, and you don't have restrictions and rules on your phone. So you can get down that YouTube rabbit hole or the Instagram rabbit hole, and a few hours have gone by and you have done nothing. So I totally get it. Happens to me. But if we can show more of an example of how to use technology appropriately, and put it away when the situation calls for it being put away. So if I'm watching a movie with my family, and my daughter's getting out her phone, I'm like, "Hey, put the phone away." But like, I also can't reach for my phone during those situations, because if I'm expecting them to put their phone away, I need to also respect that as well. So, um, then we start talking about likes determining popularity. I talked about that again in, I think, my Instagram being toxic video. Um, some of the teens are saying, more skin gets more likes. And so some teenager who's feeling bad about themselves wants to get a lot of likes on their picture or whatever might show a little more skin, because they know that if I show a little more skin, I'm going to get a lot of likes on this video, or this picture. And that really sets a terrible precedent for them, that they are own, like, it's positive reinforcement for you know, bad choices. So, um, and now we have the ability to compare ourselves with celebrities and neighbors and friends. Oh, my neighbor is, redoing their kitchen and it looks great. I wish I could redo my kitchen and things like that. Um, so I can see, we'll get into FOMO a little bit later, but you know, kids, they're smart. They know these photos are filtered and edited, and still they feel the need to compare themselves to these filtered and edited pictures. I'm like, okay, I am not filtered or edited, and I look worse, because I'm not filtered or edited. So then I need to filter and edit, and then it just kind of perpetuates. Um, what was really interesting to me is they're talking about bullies. So in the past, bullies, I could only encounter them at school, or, where I had to interact with them. But I could go to a safe place at my home where I can, leave the school, and that bullying would go away, because I am no longer near that those interactions. But now they can't get away from it. So they get bullied at school, and then they come home and they're bullied on their phone, and they block them, then somebody else comes in. And so they have access to these negative interactions all the time, and people are meaner behind the screen than they are in person. So it's easy to hide behind a screen and say terrible things, and then and not really see how that's affecting somebody else, because you feel like it's just behind a screen. Um, so that was an interesting point that I made, or not I made, that the documentary made. Um, Chris from Protect Young Eyes, if he's still on here, he says, "If I see you and look at you in the eye, we treat each other differently." Um, and I thought that was a really good quote, because it's so true. I see that all the time, in my job, when somebody's very upset, they're writing a review, or they're putting in a support desk ticket, and they're very, very upset. And then as soon as I like talk to them on the phone, or I get on a video call with them, they are nice as can be. And I totally agree with this whole thing when it's something that, our demeanor changes when we're actually talking to somebody. And I think we need to show that a little bit more for our kids as well. Um, the kids then start talking about FOMO. So the FOMO is fear of missing out. They see all of their friends at, out somewhere and they're like, "Oh, why wasn't I invited? What's wrong with me?" And and I think that is a real problem. So I think kids really need to understand, hey, not everyone's going to get invited to everything. Maybe this person who you don't know as well coordinated that event and they don't know you very well, so they didn't invite you, but it's not big, or they figured you were doing something else or whatever, whatever, whatever. And I think that's important to help kids understand that not they can't be everywhere, um and when their friends are having fun, just try and be happy for their friends that are having fun. So now the video kind of digresses from all of that and starts talking about pornography. And, super important topic here. How did we access it before? Magazines, videotapes, things like that. I am from a very naive home and I didn't even know that pornography was a thing until um, way into college. I think I was like 21 when I was like, "Oh, people, like, actually do that?" Like, I mean, I knew that, like, pornography existed. I knew about Playboy, I was 21, but I'm like, "But people like you and me, like, look at that? That's weird." I had no clue. Super, super naive about that. Um, but now this statistic, I'm going to say, is probably wrong because it said half the children age 8 to 16 had exposure to pornography. Half the children, I'm going to say that's probably closer to 80, maybe 90% of kids 8 to 16 have had exposure to pornography. It might even be closer to 95. Um, I guarantee it's more than 50%. Um, and the teens, so they start talking to the teens, and it said that every single teen said all the guys watch it. All of the, like, listen to that. Every teenager they interviewed said all of the guys watch it. Even the ones that you don't think would watch that, um, were watching it. And they all said that they think their parents are pretty clueless as to how big a problem it is. And I totally agree. Um, and I think it's getting younger and younger, first exposure to it. And I think it's super important that we have these conversations with our children early, early on, so that they know what it is when they encounter it and they know what their reaction is going to be when they encounter it, because they're going to. Um, so, I start from a very, very early age, as soon as they have access to the internet. If they're going to be online at all for any reason, you need to start having this conversation with them. And it can be very, very basic. So there is actually a really good book, um, Defend Young. Um, Defend Young Minds is the Instagram account. But they have a book called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. I actually have it here. Um, yeah, I do. Yep. See, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. Great, great, great resource to talk about pornography with your kids. But even from a super young age, I say, if you see naked mommies and daddies, turn it off and come tell me. So, because there is accidental exposure, even in my house of Fort Knox, where I've got all of the filters, all of the controls, etc., it's still going to get through in my house. So I need to prepare my kids for that day. And even if they have no devices in their house, they go to their friend's house or they get on the bus to go to school, they are going to be shown it by somebody. So, like I said, that number is way, way higher than that. Um, and parents don't understand how big of a problem it really is. So, um, they talk about this, and I totally agree with this. It's on every platform. Twitter has pornography, Pinterest, um, all of the social media platforms. Pinterest, it does have it. Twitter, for sure. Reddit, Spotify. Spotify has it. It's audio, but it's still there. Um, so, watch out for podcasts and things like that. It has infiltrated every single platform. And so it will find your children. And I'm not a fear monger. I'm not trying to terrify you and like try and take it all away. I just want you to know that it is a problem, and I want you to prepare your kids for that exposure because it will happen. Um, and they talked about porn uses SEO too. So SEO is called search engine optimization, and websites like mine, Family Tech Zone, I will optimize my articles for search engines. So if somebody's typing in, how do I set up an iPhone for parental controls, I can optimize my article to be like the first result in that search engine results. And so pornography, they use that as well. They will take those and use those same tactics to make theirs appear higher in search results. So they saturate each platform as soon as it's released. If there's a new social media app, guarantee they've already come in and started to infiltrate that with that stuff. So a couple resources. I love Fight the New Drug. It's a great resource for pornography addiction. Um, and I just say you need to have conversations earlier than you think. Even if they don't have access, they will be exposed to it. Um, so then the documentary goes into starting to talk about to the kids about how relationships start now. Back in my day, you'd pass them a note, or I think I talked about this in one of my other lives, I think in the privacy one. Where I wrote a note saying, I liked this boy. It said, "He will be mine. Oh, yes, he will be mine." Because Wayne's World was a total thing. And that's a Wayne's World quote. And and had his name and everything. And my math teacher read it in front of the whole class, in which he was in there. But then he asked me out and we started dating. So it worked out for me. But that's how relationships started when I was a kid. You're like, "Oh, you're cute," or "I passed you a note," or whatever. I remember passing a note that said, "I like you. Do you like me?" Circle. Yes, no, maybe. That's how relationships started back in my day. But now they're talking about how people don't go out on dates anymore. I think that is super sad. You build a relationship online first. And somebody mentioned that sexting is the new first base. So you see this all the time, people asking for nudes. And you send a nude and then it goes around the school. And it says, why? And then I wrote down here, because they're talking about how they'll even get nudes that are unsolicited, mostly from guys. We call those D pics, if you know what I mean. Um, and I just wrote this. I'm like, why do guys think that's something girls want to see, even adults? I don't understand that. Like, no girls want to see that. None at all. So I don't know why guys continue to send that to people. We don't want to see it. Just putting that out there right there. If you're a guy, nobody wants to see that. Don't do it. Um, but one thing that they were talking about in the documentary is kind of along the lines of no such thing as bad press. So a girl sends news and she gets either hate for it or a lot of attention from other guys for it. And it's a lot of attention, whether that's negative attention or positive attention. It's the no such thing as bad press. Either way, it is attention, and it can be something that they want. So anyway, and then they start talking about how, sometimes they think on Snapchat, it's not that serious. Okay, I'm going to send them this on Snapchat and it's going to disappear. it goes back to my whole privacy thing. Nothing disappears. It is going to be saved no matter what. So if you think, okay, this is safe to send because it's going to disappear as soon as he sees it, it is not safe to send. Nothing is private, nothing goes away. If you're going to send it, it's going to be permanent no matter what. Um, so then the documentary goes into the NMK syndrome, which is the not my kid syndrome. And, I see this all the time. Like, I'm not a teacher, but I feel really bad for teachers um, because I think they get this all the time where they're saying, hey, your kid is doing something and it's a problem. And the parent is like, oh, my kid would never do something like that. Well, I'm the teacher and I know that they did, so what are you gonna do about it? And I feel that that's like a big problem with a lot of parents who just feel like space to be in, because kids make mistakes. I make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. And, whether or not you think that your kid could ever do something like that is, you need to get rid of that thought, and it can happen to your kid and it might happen to your kid. So you need to make sure you understand that any kid, and it's not that your kid is bad because they did that or anything like that. You need to make sure that they understand that as well so they can come to you. But definitely do not have the not my kid syndrome. All the kids will be exposed to this kind of things. So and some of these kids will perpetuate these things. So as long as you're aware, and if you're checking up on what their online activities are and you are involved and having conversations with them, then you'll know when they're having these issues before it even gets brought to your attention. So just don't think not my kid, because it can definitely be your kid. um so we're going back into in the documentary, so stranger danger of the past, the white van, we just talked about that, puppies and candy. I remember I never got offered puppies and candy from a white van, and that's really sad, right? I wouldn't have taken it. I would have known not to go. But the stranger danger of the past is very, very different now. Stranger danger now is these people who will pop into your teens' direct messages and start conversations with them. So they talked to the teens in this documentary, and they were saying that, they're like, oh, yeah, I think like half of my Instagram followers are people that I actually know. And I'm like, "Mm." Like, people are following you and, like, able to message you on Instagram that you don't even know. And, like, we had stranger danger, like, embedded in our brains, and they don't have stranger danger embedded in their brains for online interactions. And I think they need to be a lot more concerned about strangers online, and who they say they are, and how that could definitely not be who they actually are. Um, and they're talking to uh, parents or kids like, oh, who are you playing online with? Oh, I don't know, some kid. And they always say some kid. Well, 9 times out of 10 it might not be a kid. So strangers contacting on Instagram. And the Bark CEO in the documentary says most parents underestimate the commonality of this problem. And I totally agree. So I do have a quick reel about how to disable the ability for strangers to direct message your child. And I suggest highly that you turn that on. Um, and so then they start going into this video that they published. And if you're watching on YouTube or if you're on Instagram, go over to the YouTube, and I will link this video in the description, because they have this catfishing video that is so good. And I totally recommend you show this to your children. It is uncomfortable, super, super uncomfortable, especially if you haven't had conversations about these online dangers and pornography. Then you'll probably want to have that conversation first before you show them this video. It's a pretty quick video, but they create this 11-year-old persona and 11-year-old persona on Instagram. They make the profile live on Instagram. Within 1 minute and 7 seconds, message requests start coming in, because the profile says the child's age, or, it's clear that it's a child. And these are disgusting messages, or, hey, you look cute, etc., etc. But these are strangers. And I make a note. I'm like, this part makes me physically sick. Like, I was physically sick during this part, and I've seen this video before. But when I was watching it again within Childhood 2.0, I was, oh, it's disturbing, about how quickly, that these strangers are getting access to your children. Um, and the video, it starts, uh, the video within the video. So, like I said, this is the catfishing video for Bark, but it's inside this Childhood 2.0 documentary. And she ends up, like, it's this adult woman, and she is, like, using filters and things to make herself look younger. She does look young, but she doesn't look 11 for sure. But she ends up meeting up with one of the guys. Obviously they're doing this like the, to catch a predator kind of thing, where he comes and then they, arrest him. They had law enforcement involved and everything like that. But just crazy how easily they can access your children through these platforms. So, the best line of defense, and I think this was the Bark CEO and Tatiana, saying, is active and engaged parents. And I totally agree. I wrote a post, I want to say, like 7-8 years ago. My website's been around for a long time, about being where your kids are sharing. So if your kid uses Snapchat a lot, you need an account on Snapchat. If your kid is on TikTok, you need an account on TikTok. If your kid is on Instagram, you need an account on Instagram. And having, like, being able to be there where they're sharing, seeing kind of what's trending and things like that, really helps give you insight into that. And then utilizing monitoring tools that are in place so that you can check up on them frequently. And I'm not saying read everything that they're doing. That would take you all day, every day, because kids talk a lot online. But check in on them from time to time. Use Bark, and that's going to give you alerts as to concerning content in their social media interactions. It works better on an Android than it does on an iPhone, so just be aware of that. But just be involved with what your kid is doing online so that you can know what is going on. So then the documentary starts talking about suicide, and how bullying online contributes. And I right, we've moved into the really heartbreaking part. Suicide rates are climbing. The older lady, who was talking about the depression in, not depression, but the depression, back in the day. She says people can't deal with things anymore. And even the teens said that kids are too sensitive now. And again, I'm wondering if that is more of a Gen X trying to parent this new generation, how we are making kids too sensitive and not allowing them to do things for themselves, like, oh, it's just easier if I do it, because we are so used to just doing everything for ourselves, so we're just going to do everything for everybody. I'm super guilty of this, because if something needs to be done, I'm just going to do it because it's easier and it's faster if I do it, other than trying to explain it to somebody else. But that really does a disservice to your kids, so making sure your kids are doing chores, that I am so shocked at how many kids don't have chores to do. My kids always have chores. They have chores every day. They have to check off their chores before they get internet access. There needs to be more work. And so this work ethic is a big thing, and it's huge right now. There is such a shortage of workers. Everywhere you go is now hiring, urgently hiring, 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 hiring. And part of it is because they're getting more money not working than they are, through unemployment and things like that, than they are actually working. But the other problem is this work ethic is gone with our kids these days. And I don't know how to get that back. We need to instill this work ethic into our kids and, have them do hard things instead of just taking it over and doing the hard things for them. So the teens even said it themselves that kids are way too sensitive now. You say something and we're just allowing this sensitivity to perpetrate. And I don't know how to fix that, but it's not the technology's fault. It's society's fault that we are allowing these kids to be so sensitive that they can't handle any negative interactions. Um, so Gen X, so these are kind of notes to myself as I was watching the documentary. Gen X, are we not teaching kids to self-regulate and deal with emotions? Um, and then they talked about how, everybody's just bored these days. Um, it's the like it's my problem of I have all of these DVDs, and then when I go to sit down and watch a movie, I'm like, I cannot make a decision as to what movie I wanna watch because I have so much choice. And I think that's a big problem that the kids are facing is they have so much that they can do. There is so much they can do, and instead of trying to, like, make these choices, they just default to, like, what's easiest, and they continue to do that, and so they always default to the easiest thing no matter, what's going on in their life. So then they start talking more about how Gen X is paranoid about leaving kids alone. Like I said, I think we were like too ingrained in this stranger danger, where we feel like we can't let kids experience anything. Um, and and then it goes into, I made this note. We don't have to find news anymore. News finds us. And I was talking to a publicist, and they were saying how these days, people don't watch the news, like especially the younger generation. They don't watch the news, as they're like teenagers, college age, because they're like, why would I need to watch the news? Like news comes to me. And it's so true with social media and everything. Things happen as soon as they happen because the news comes to you. And so you're always being fed all of this information all of the time. Um, so I think that's just interesting how um, when we can see everything that's going on in the world, it's much easier to just get discouraged or anything because there's so much going on. And then everyone that we circle back in the documentary to how we were all out as kids. And everyone in the interview wants to take away the internet and take away social media. Like if it was gone, it would be a better place and everything like that. And so then I am like, oh, but what about all the good that has come from technology? Because like I said, I'm a very tech positive person. So this part was like breaking my heart. I'm like, oh my gosh, like you are just focusing on all of the negative and not any of the positive. But then they start focusing on the positive, and I was like, oh, okay, you redeemed it. So some people are talking about technology being amazing. We just need to take back control. And that I totally, totally agree with. I think if we can take control and control ourselves, make sure our kids are able to control themselves on technology, I think things will improve for sure. So the kids in the documentary say, or no. There was one parent I don't remember who said this. It says the kids need to see the parents as the experts in tech. And I like, maybe did a shout for joy, hallelujah about this because I totally, totally agree. And that's kind of my whole mission is I want everybody to be a tech expert. So they can help their children and help their families. And so I totally agree with that. If the kids know that if I have a question about technology, if I have a question about what I'm seeing online or anything like that, I can come to my parents and my parents are the experts and they know. I think that is going to be a huge help for all of these problems. Um, so when somebody said like, "I want to talk to my parents, they just don't get it, and they want their parents to get it." So that is like my big soapbox for today is, you don't have to be a tech expert, but you do need to know what is happening and you need to know what is going on your kids' devices and what your kids are doing so that you can help them navigate the tech world. And I think that's just so, so important. So that is the Childhood 2.0 review. It was really good. I recommend if you've talked to your children about pornography already, then you definitely want to watch this with your kids. It's got some really great insight from the teens. I loved their interviews because I thought that was a really good um, I love that they interviewed the parents and the teens of those parents because it really helped to see both sides of the coin. And it's true, these teens want us to understand technology and they want to be able to come to us with these problems. But if they don't feel like you will get it, then they're not going to come to you. So, make a little bit of effort, research. I always say if your child was diagnosed with a serious illness, you're going to spend all night researching everything about that illness so that you can help keep them healthy and safe. And people don't do that with technology. And I think that is a huge problem these days. So, do a little research, get some knowledge about technology, and your kids and everything will have a much better experience with technology. So, that is my soapbox. Thank you so much for joining me. And again, I do this every Tuesday. Make sure you follow me on Instagram. I'm at Family Tech, and go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you can have all of the tech tips and advice you did not even know you needed. So we'll see you next Tuesday.